る前まで会えたなら願 Welcome to AsobiFM. I'm your host, Shinden9, and today I have two special guests. Returning today is TimeEnforcerAnubis.
Yes, sir. This is TimeEnforcerAnubis.
And joining us for the first time is Chuck Gaffney.
Hey, how you doing? Oh, you can hear my daughter in the background. So, yeah, nice to be here. Yeah, my little daughter's name is Yuna.
So I'm assuming you got that name from Final Fantasy X.
Yes. it was actually originally the nickname of for my wife, because my wife she's a quarter Japanese, and she looks like Yuna from Final Fantasy X, so we were calling my wife Yuna. And then when she was pregnant with Yuna, we originally were going to choose my wife's grandmother's name, which is she's from Japan. Her name's Kyoko, but Kyoko did not want to be. She was embarrassed. She didn't want to be named. She didn't want her great granddaughter named after her, so we went with Yuna instead.
Mm-hmm. So not to get sidetracked for too long, but do you know when her great grandmother emigrated?
Yes. Roughly, well, generally speaking, she immigrated roughly right at I think in the early 50s, late 40s, like not too long after the war, because
okay.
My wife's late grandfather and her met in Japan. He was serving in World War II. That was how, if I'm not mistaken, that's how they met. And they also went to school out here as well. So I think it was like the early 50s, if I'm not mistaken. But my father-in-law, my wife's father, he's half Japanese, half Italian, and he was born in Japan. When they moved when he was about a year old. So yeah, I got to figure out the age of my father-in-law, and yeah, I'll figure out the exact year when they came in. But yeah, that's so my father-in-law is actually technically a Japanese immigrant.
Huh. Yeah. Because I've noticed that a lot of people who were in the United States during the internment period, and also a lot of them who came in the 40s and 50s, they will not really like having Japanese names, or will go by a more Americanized name, because it was something they went through. They went through discrimination a lot more back in the 50s than they would in modern times, when it's like more acceptable to have a Japanese name in the US, thank God. But anyway, not to get too deep into that stuff. All right, so
it's okay. That is exactly what that comes from, though. Yeah, but yeah, that could be a topic for another day. But totally, that's My father-in-law's name is Alex. His siblings are also American. But yeah, yeah.
So the topic for today is more about sort of the stereotypes that fans of Japanese animation and media have gained over the years, and have not been able to get rid of, even as we can see that those don't really apply too much anymore. So I think the main issue is that there's not a lot of exposure to people who are more successful in life, because they either keep their hobbies separate from their lives, or they don't talk about their hobbies too much. So this is more of a making successful otaku more visible kind of situation that I wanted to begin the discussion on. And could we start off with you, Anubis? I haven't heard too much from you so far. What you do, and how it applies to your hobbies and your role in hobby space.
So, I mean, I would consider myself like relatively, like, I'm doing relatively well for myself in life, and what that means for me is that I'm able to do what I want as far as my hobbies go, to a much higher level than I would if I was like back in my like early 20s and whatnot. But so what I've come to see is kind of my role in the hobby space is I'm the guy who talks about otaku culture and otaku media from a business standpoint,
which is something that you don't hear a whole lot from anybody else, because they talk about, it as passion and everything, which I definitely agree that we should be talking about things as passion and being open about yourself. But at the same time, we shouldn't think of the business standpoint or thinking about things from the business standpoint as being sort of like a sin, like the dirty no. Like there's a narrative that you've been fighting against for a long time, which is the idea that there are shows that only exist to sell a product, like a toy line or something like that, and that should be considered lower class media when that's not the case at all.
Right. That's usually speaking, that's the majority of that, especially for anime. That's the
Yes.
majority of anime that's created.
Yes, you're
And
not
that should be embraced.
exactly, yeah.
Because chances are your favorite anime was created to sell a product.
And it was created by people who wanted the product, whether it was an experience or more likely it was like toy lines or things like that.
Exactly. And all of that goes to it goes to further guarantee the success of the anime that ultimately people wanted, because otherwise it probably wouldn't have been made.
Hmm.
And so that's a lot of what I've been talking about for the past several years. It's that, and sort of like what we're talking about now is talking about otaku as a lifestyle, which sounds kind of weird, but if you look at otaku pursuits, if you take a real, like, truthful look at them, you're not you find that to do this at a, like, if you see someone who has a bunch of glass cases full of anime figurines, that's add those all up, you're going to approach $1,000 very quickly. These things are about like $150 a piece if you're looking at nice ones.
Yeah, I have
go
looked
for it.
over my my collection on several occasions and just added up not prices they could sell at, but just the MSRP, just looking at these things and thinking like, wow, there is more value on these shelves than there is in my car when I bought it.
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
Of deal.
Like, so you look at that and you quickly realize that this is a lifestyle that if you're doing it for real, takes a lot of it takes some level of discipline.
Yes.
It's not just mindless consumerism. Oh, I see a nice thing, I buy it. There's definitely some of that, but at the same time, to even get to the level where you can do that comfortably, you have to be at a certain. You can't be the basement dweller. That doesn't
Exactly.
happen.
I mean,
No,
go ahead, Chuck.
go ahead.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, I remember even when I was with my store, when I was selling the average figure, the 1/8 scale to 1/7 scale figures, at least the MSRP was like 100, or maybe like 90 at the lowest scale. To have a dozen of them on your shelf, that's easily over $1,000 right there. So, let alone, of course, again, like Shin was saying, like the now the selling value of them, sell them after shade all the time. A good chunk of them do. Yeah.
So both of you actually run or have run, currently running. I'm not sure of the case with Chuck. It's I don't really understand what's going on that front, but you are in the business of selling these goods, these character goods, figures, things like that. Chuck has been speaking a lot on Twitter about his issues with Amazon, who are taking down listings for a lot of products for very strange reasons that don't really make sense unless it's some sort of mass flagging campaign or something like that. Did you want to speak more about your business and how that's been going?
Yeah, totally. I know it's definitely a little confusing with what's been going on with me, because it's like, do you run your business? It's going. What happened was I started it back in 2007
Hmm.
when I kind of did like a redo of my site. My anime site has been around since two, and I started to go back into it even more in around 2006, 2007, and let me add a store to it if I, because I like the figures, but what's going on. And Nendoroid just started. Nendoroid Figments were just barely on the on the thinking point of like Good Smile Company and stuff. And I was one of the first retailers to join in on that rather early on. Still obviously it's still small fry compared to, I think, at the time a couple of retailers there, but it was very small. It was still very small. So, but I started gaining at the time. My day job was actually working as just like a web guy at a camera store. At a pro camera store, I was just taking care of their website. It was like kind of like, I don't know if you know of B&H Camera in New York City.
Yes.
But imagine a much smaller version of them on Long Island. That's where I was working at.
Huh.
And of course, actually, I think I was on the B&H site more than I was on the website that we were working on. My boss was constantly telling, "What's the price of this? What's this?" Like, all right, change the prices to this, and that was my job. So I had a little bit of time of dealing with e-commerce and everything, and of course, my background was in computer science. I knew how to program, and I had my site. So I was like, let me add an e-commerce store to this thing and start doing stuff. And I first was starting on eBay, which was the easier way to dive in. Amazon was still, not many people were buying, especially anime figures there. They weren't really, collectibles weren't a thing on it. Eventually, that caught on. So I was selling on eBay and Amazon, and then eventually my own site directly too. I was selling, heck, even back in 2000, even a little after some of the things happened to myself personally. I actually even was one of the first people to buy anime figures through Bitcoin using BitPay and stuff. This was back in like 2014. Someone did buy it too.
Wow.
I think I remember back then. It was for 0.3 Bitcoin, which right now I think is worth decent amount of money. Yeah, which I did not save it as Bitcoin. I did convert it to but to go back to, I had a lot of listings for a bit from, like, I'd say 2009 until 2011. I was selling easily over $100,000 worth of figures, with the most being in 2011. Over two, that was split between eBay, Amazon, and my own site, where eBay was the most. Amazon was the second, while my site was third in sales. The reason why it kind of dwindled after that was literally because my wholesaler at the time was really the only wholesaler anyone can get any figures from. This doesn't matter if you're a Crunchyroll, who was starting to build their own anime store too at the time, it was really one place to get the official stuff. Because another problem, and I think it's still a problem to this day, is bootlegs with these figures.
Yep.
The bootlegs are still a huge problem, and one of the issues I had was still trying to convince people, hey, I'm not selling the fake stuff, I'm selling the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, but yeah, and she's singing. No, but so I was trying to sell the figures at, show them. But this business goes very, for you to do anything in this business, you have to be very much on top of the pre-order setup. Everything's pre-order. It's announced by like Good Smile Company, Figma, Kotobukiya, whoever, and then 6 months later is when the figure will actually be out, or later than that, sometimes a year later. And then, so you have to, as a retailer, order early before the pre-order stuff ends, and then it will, and then so you have a big backlog of pre-orders. So, and also people who will buy the stuff early on. I had people that were, the day the stuff was announced, even before I saw it, and when they looked, they were like hovering over Good Smile Company's thing. They were like, "Hey, are you gonna get this in stock? I'll buy it right from you right away." And I put it on my site, and it would be immediately purchased. Problem was, at the end of 2011, there was this thing called Hurricane Sandy that hit this area. Now, I didn't lose figurines or anything from the actual storm, but what happened was, at that time, I was out for like a day or two, not being able to be in contact. It was like the end of it was a very late season storm, and my wholesaler, who was going to have a whole bunch of stuff, pre-orders that were going to go to me.
Yeah.
They called me. They tried to get in touch with me that day, and they didn't because we got hit by the storm and everything. And I literally, like a day or two later, got back in touch with them. And I said, okay, yeah, send over the pre-orders. They had to tell me hey, we have these things that just came in from California. They all come in through them from boat to California, and they would and they're like, okay, now we can release them over to you. Great. So I said yes, and then when I got the sheets of what was coming in and what was supposed to be coming in, it was completely off. I was only getting half of what I pre-ordered, and what was worse about it was that the stuff that was coming in was the stuff that I was mainly going to be selling slowly over time as they appreciated, or just, selling them I would sell them I would not be like a scalper and go beyond SRP. I'd pretty much be keeping it at SRP. If it would go above SRP, I'd throw it up on eBay on auction and let the people decide what the price was. I would not be like, oh yeah, I got this 1/8 scale figure, we're going to sell for $3.99. It's like, well, all right, yeah, someone wants to sell it for $3.99, but let me put it on auction. Is it really worth $3.99? I'll let the consumer decide. If it MSRP for $120, I got it at wholesale. So even if I sell it at MSRP, I'm get a profit. I'm not looking to scalp people, and but what happened was the half that didn't come in during that was the half that people already paid me for figures, and the wholesaler already sent out the stuff to other retailers. So I had to play catch up. I actually, for the most part, except for maybe one or two orders, I went and I bought the stuff at wholesale at retail from other retailers and quickly had them send it to the customers who were there. So I lost out on money. I got into pretty decent debt from that, and so my store had to take a decent hit with like pre-orders and everything. I was literally at the point where I was going to be able to quit that job at that camera store to do this full time, right around the time of Hurricane Sandy, and then that wholesaler totally ripped it, just took that away from me. I'm like, okay, and this is the only wholesaler at the time. And then also too, another thing was Crunchyroll did not too long before that started selling figures too. They were originally, of course, going back talking about Crunchyroll, they started as a pirate website, and and then they became official, and then after they became official, they started selling figures. Fine, but then they really started. They also kind of took over some of the other smaller sellers at the time. This is going back to 2011.
Yeah.
So over the time, I did try to keep the site alive a bit, but I that's when I started jumping into voice acting. I started jumping into voice acting around 2012, 2013. 2013 is when I started getting some voice acting gigs, just trying to get myself back in. Still wanted to keep myself in the industry to some degree, and over time the stock started to go down in terms of stuff that I had. I couldn't really rebuy stuff new, and to this day I still have some stuff left over, but it's very light. I have Batman Nendoroid. I think I just sold a few of like the Nendoroid Super Mario Brothers that I had left. But then this goes back into what the heck happened on Amazon. Now when I was listing stuff on Amazon, and then Amazon became easier to list than at eBay, you would just find the MSRP, you just find the SKU number of the figure, and chances are the description was already set up. Sometimes I had to actually be the retailer that puts up the description that all other retailers would utilize on Amazon. But 9 out of 10 times, I'd be just going, okay, this is the SKU, it's there, click it as on, it's in stock. Then when they sold out, it automatically went onto a, it's not for sale, it's sold out, but it's in my listing still.
Yes.
So but they left there. So it's still in the inventory, but they were already sold out. But then that's when, like 2 years ago, I first started seeing Amazon was basically like, hey, these figures have been removed because they're doing they represent child exploitation, and if you don't remove these, if you don't go into your old listings and manually delete them, we're going to delete your account. And I'm like, this is 2 years ago, 2019. I'm like, what the and I look at the figures and I'm like, no, this doesn't represent any of that. And that's when I first brought up this, 2 years ago, when it was like, this is a sign of something weird. And then at the beginning of this year, at around the end of February, it started to happen again, but more so. Like, going to like practically every one of my figures, I was getting batches of like 6-7 figures at once. They were like, all these have been removed. And I still, to this day, literally yesterday morning, I got to get another one. I haven't been listing them up on Twitter, but there's been more that keep coming up of my old listings. I don't know if, and that's why I say every time I was tweeting this stuff was like, is this just older figures or is it newer stuff? I don't know, because I haven't had any newer stuff up for a couple of years now, a number of years now. I haven't had any newer SKUs up. So is it just the older stuff? But even then, even though it's the older stuff, it's like, what the heck is going on? And like, for example, the most recent figures that just got batch removed was old Haruhi Suzumiya figures, Figma figures.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of those are sexualized in any way. They're not cast off figures or anything. And even then, the cast off figures, it's like, well, that's what they are, and then they represent like usually like 18 and older anime. It's not and characters. It's not like they're the Haruhi Suzumiya figures. They're all if you've seen the Figma figures, it's something is weird going on. It's either someone at Amazon hates anime, and it's only the Amazon US. Other people have verified that it's only the US listing.
Yeah.
Someone at Amazon hates anime to the point that they just want to go in and start flagging old stuff, or maybe some new stuff. Again, I'm not sure about the new stuff. It'd be cool if other retailers were like, hey, yeah, what the heck's happening with my newer stuff? But they're either flagging it or massive, there's groups of people going in who also hate anime that are going and flagging this stuff, saying it's child exploitation. And the timing of all this does seem to coincide a little bit of the announcement of Pira and Mira in Smash Bros, but somewhat. I mean, it's still, this stuff was still happening 2 years ago to some degree. So
I'm going to confuse you a little bit more here, and it might explain a little bit. So several years ago, I actually ordered a few hentai DVDs. I don't know if it was off of Amazon, but I don't know if you've heard of one called the Karma Sayuki, I believe it was called. It's a Journey to the West parody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was shocked when I found that on Amazon. It took a little bit of digging to find that, and I actually found it and ordered it on Amazon. But if you go on Amazon right now, you can find Faku published physical works. So these are like TTK Ishike, those things like that, that have been published in the US by Faku, which are being listed officially on Amazon. And they're showing like Faku is an Amazon listed publisher now, which I find very strange because they're going after figures, but then like the actual pornographic things that are being published by Faku are available on Amazon with no sort of issue.
It is very odd. Of
Yeah.
course, and even like some of the figures that are related were like, it's like, wait, the more hentai, more risque versions of these figures were the ones that are staying, while some of the more innocent ones are being the ones taken flagged down. And that's why it also just leads me to think it's something with popularity, and so it's like something that when someone's doing a very generic search, they're finding this and they're flagging it, or it could also, again, it could be someone internally in Amazon. I'm not sure, but
and I can imagine for a case like Faku, they would be able to have the clout and the ability to legally strong arm themselves into a position where they can say, Amazon, you need to keep this up. Meanwhile, the smaller sellers like you're not going to have a lawyer on speed dial who's going to straighten these things out.
Yeah.
So
you're pretty much left to the masses. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd imagine that it's
pretty much so.
I'd imagine that it's sort of it's contributing to the sort of centralization around like the larger players, and that's something that we've seen happening on the internet everywhere from Amazon to YouTube. Is that the higher productions, the larger companies and things are having more of a sway and more of a say in things, especially on more centralized websites like Amazon, which eBay is still more in the territory of smaller sellers, not like wholesalers or anything like that. But the smaller sellers on eBay are going to have are more of a level playing field. Meanwhile, Amazon seems to be providing more or giving more leeway to larger players. But also,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was going to transition to something else, but go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say like too, like eBay back then, a lot of the sellers, including myself back then, was like, eBay, what are you doing? Amazon's gonna kick your ass, and sure enough, Amazon did. When it came to listing stuff and whatnot, but it became with this current setup a saving grace that they didn't go the route of making the listings be like homogenous the way that they are on Amazon. One SKU represents basically on Amazon when you're selling on Amazon, you're representing you have one SKU and a bunch of figures that represent that SKU. On eBay, it's all right. You're looking for this item. Here's this item sold by multiple different sellers in multiple different landing pages.
Right.
So that actually during this recent kind of development stuff, it's actually it's benefiting because then they can't stuff like that can't exactly happen where you have a massive deletion of a SKU. It's like you can't. If eBay wanted to do that, and they have with some things, most of the time from what I've seen, that stuff has been generally correct. If they removed it, they would totally ban some of the stuff being sold. I mean, and that's going back to like really old things you shouldn't be selling on eBay, but like some funny joke stuff that people were selling. It was kind of funny, like, oh, this guy sold his virginity on eBay, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, all right, eBay's going to ban you for that. I understand, ban you from listing that, but stuff like that. But they're not. But for them to go in and say delete the Mikuru Figma figure, that's a lot tougher for them to do than Amazon just flipping the switch that one SKU.
Yeah, I've noticed when I started a business, Asobi Industries, and what I'm selling are patches that I have designed, or later on I'm going to have artists start designing things, and I'm going to be compensating them on that basis. But selling on eBay, like I will when I order these patches, I have to order them in bulk, and that's a high initial cost for me. So when I'm selling these things on eBay, they don't want me selling more than 10, otherwise I have to essentially like give them all sorts of different information and stuff about like a business license and all these things if I'm selling a stock of them higher than 10. And Amazon is a very similar situation. I couldn't figure out a way to make what my product is. I couldn't find a way to make it work for Amazon. So I started off on Etsy with plans to start up a Shopify once that becomes more viable for what I'm doing. But I've noticed that there's a lot more. There are a lot more hurdles for situations like that, especially with the SKUs and things like that. So
yeah, actually that reminded me real quick too of one item that I do have multiple of that is worth a lot of money. And I just can't seem to sell it on Amazon because they were looking for some of that information. It's funny, is I gave them that information, yet it still wasn't sufficient. It's the Sailor Moon Proplica music box, the one that's got the projection panels in it, where it's got the two little statues of Sailor Moon and Mamoru up top, and it's got it acts like it's like the one that was seen in one of the ending. I forget which ending credits. But it's literally that drop. And I see these sellers are trying to sell for $600-$700 a pop. And I bought the whole case of it. I kept it. I think I kept two. one for myself, and I think we have a backup because we gave one to Una. But it's like, but they're actually worth like, I look, I'm like, oh, they're worth like a crap ton of money. And I have like 4 or 5 of them still left from the case. And I tried to go on to Amazon to sell it. This was like about a year ago. I was like, all right, let me try to just put this right back on there. And then they were like, no, you need to show the order receipt from your wholesaler. And I'm like, okay, here it is. Here it is. And they're like, oh, it needs to have been a quantity of 12 and above. I'm like, but I ordered it. I think it was a pack of 6.
Yeah.
Which was a legit wholesale pack of these. It usually goes in like 6, 12, 24. When like I remember Figma figures, for example, a full pack of 20. I remember selling a crap ton of the BlackRock shooter Figma figures. I sold like 5 cases.
I remember when those came out.
And those were all in. What was that?
I remember when those came out.
Yeah, they were cool, and I think recently Good Smile Company was announcing another Good Smile, a good BlackRock shooter figure, but it's like I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my god, that thing's gonna fall apart. It's like there's so many like thin pieces to it. I'm like, oh no, because I had problems too with like the 1/8 scale figures. They would all come in with like I was like. Couple of them I had to sell that way. I had to like tell the people like, listen, just hold this way and I'll take a hit. I tried to bring them back, but it was literally almost everyone came in the back. But yeah, and I'm just over the years too. Like I was doing voice acting. I got my programming job. I eventually got in New York City, which has kept me stupidly busy. And so the figure business kept on the side, and my goal now lately has been, granted I'm a little behind still, like a couple weeks. It's been about a month now since I was announcing some stuff. I did start to try to rebuild certain. I feel like one of the things I wanted to do was to, and this is going back to what you were saying about with like centralization. I do want to build like where my site store is going into more like decentralized kind of, almost maybe not sort of cryptocurrency, but more of like the Ethereum side of things where everything's decentralized. So that way things don't get, broken up, where your content isn't destroyed. Kind of going in the mindset of what a site like Minds.com has done and stuff like that is where like, kind of like prevent because, and I can say this as a programmer who I've done stuff with Google not too long ago. One of the new projects was called Swirl. It's taken 3D assets and making them. You ever see like the Google ads, the Google Sense ads? They're all like 2D banners. Well, they wanted to do 3D, and I was one of the people that helped them build the prototype, the 3D one. It's called Swirl using the Google Web Designer. Thing is, they were kind of that's what they've been doing is they're outsourcing a lot of stuff in general too. They kind of do exactly what a lot of the contractors. I can say, even as someone in the industry of the programming, I'm like, yeah, this stuff is a lot of companies have gotten too monolithic, and there needs to be some sort of person. I feel like what some of these alternative sites are doing, political or not, it's that's not the case. It's more on the tech side. Like look at Minds.com, what they do with generating users get like profit in a way too through the blockchain. I feel like that's something that should be the general direction that anyone who doesn't want to be under the wings of these monolithic tech needs to do. It's hard to talk. Anubis, I'm sorry. I've been chatting you guys' ears off this whole time.
No worries. This is very interesting. I've actually been looking into decentralized internet infrastructure, particularly for otaku communities. So
yeah, I've actually recently bought .crypto domains. I own animeshrine.crypto. I think I should be. I think .zil as well. I'm going to be setting up stuff with that. And that way, things are on that whole crypto side because it's not really so much. Yeah, it can be a thing with the whole Bitcoin and currency. More of like preventing these very almost monopoly setups with these big tech stop to lose their power. They need to. It's too easy for someone's entire business to just be uprooted by, you know, Amazon disagreeing on something, or Google, or Microsoft. You know, it's
Exactly. That's that's something that Anubis talks about a lot. Is it's not just from an economic standpoint that that this whole centralization of everything is bad. It's also from a subcultural standpoint. We see a lot of this toxicity coming about with, and it all boils down to people who aren't used to sort of otaku subculture, because we have a lot of things that are hard to explain, or a lot of things that it's like if you don't know about this thing, or if you've never encountered somebody who enjoys these things, you're going to make sort of assumptions or moral judgments on people. And what you're doing is you're giving these people, you're taking all these people and putting them into, say, Twitter, for example. It's just all of these people, they're going to have a culture clash because they're being introduced to each other in an unfiltered way, where it's not like a sensationalized production or anything like that. Like one of the weird TLC shows that were on back like 5 or 6 years ago. I haven't had cable in a while, so I don't know what it's like now. But that's where a lot of this toxicity is coming from, is that a lot of people are only meeting otaku online. They're only seeing them online. And these otaku are assuming that their entire audience are going to be people who are subculturally similar to them. And that's a major issue, because we went from an era where you didn't have that kind of thing, where everything, like, if you had a certain niche interest, you were going to pro boards forums and things like that to discuss these things with like-minded people. And yes, there was always some sort of political discourse going on in the background and stuff, but what everybody was getting along over was their shared interest in these certain subculture things. And nowadays that seems to be sort of disappearing into this centralized system where you have so-called anti-Twitter, and you have all these different things that you have like a direct lens into something, or even stuff that just falls onto your lap as you're browsing. If you even have like the smallest interest in Hiroaka or something like that. Like back in the day, if you were getting into anime, you were naturally eased into it. You weren't thrown like you didn't just like go onto like Twitter or something like that, and you're like, oh, I wonder what they're saying about this show that I'm interested in, and it's suddenly a culture shock for you, and then you start to think that this is like maybe not the right place for me, or you think, I should change these people or get rid of these people to make it so I can enjoy these things in a way that I feel is socially acceptable on my grounds. And that's something that we need to find a way to get around that. And I think that the main thing that's keeping people on these larger aggregate sites like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, to lesser degrees Facebook, but still, is that it's the user interface of Twitter is much easier to work with than a pro boards forum. You don't have to have like a moderate understanding of bulletin board markup system and all that kind of stuff just to insert an image. You don't have to host it on an offsite like on PhotoBucket or anything like that, and then use the insert image code to put it into your forum post and all that kind of crap. It's like Twitter makes a lot of that stuff easier, and that's what makes Twitter an appealing place to go for so many people. And also the fact that there's so many people who are on Twitter, so that's why a lot of these websites are sort of mimicking the Twitter user interface that in my opinion, that's what's been going on. But the decentralization of this whole system is something that we desperately need to happen if we want to have a system that's not so toxic, that's introducing so many different people into the subculture that don't understand what's going on and will draw the worst conclusions possible from what they're encountering for the first time, or outside of actually knowing people who are into these different things and understanding, hey, this person isn't going to be a criminal. They're not a bad person or antisocial. They're not a perma-virgin living in mom's basement and need to touch grass or whatever the hell they're saying now. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, the touch grass thing's funny.
Yeah.
And it's also like when you're only encountering a particular subculture of people through the internet, chances are you're encountering the most extreme elements of
Exactly.
that particular subculture. So you're not gonna run into the otherwise relatively normal person who just has a lot of anime figures. You're gonna run into the most outspoken, the most extreme elements of otaku subculture, and that's gonna color your perception of the whole culture.
Especially if
even if those people on a grand scheme basically don't even exist.
Yeah.
Like there's such a tiny proportion of the subculture that, were it not for being amplified via Twitter and other platforms, nobody would ever see them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's there's also the fact that online a lot of people are playing a character, they're playing a bit. So, for instance, a lot of the biggest one you'll probably find is Melonpan, who he's a Swiss guy who just plays this outrageous character. And I don't know if you've seen Melonpan on Twitter or on YouTube, Chuck, but yeah, he will put on a full SS uniform and play this pervy otaku character who it's like it plays up on stereotypes and also just like it's to outrage. And he did one where he cooked a bunch of Nendroid faceplates into a pasta or something. This was a few years ago, but like things that like people would never do, or the meme of hot gluing, if you've ever heard of hot gluing, which it doesn't involve a hot glue gun.
Yeah, I've known about that for a number of
but
years.
That's something
especially
nobody does that unless they're playing it up as a bit, but everybody's assuming that, oh, you have these figures, so of course you're going to be doing that kind of crap, and it's like, I would never. Nobody I know would ever. That's
no.
Ugh.
Like, yeah, same, and yeah, especially as a retailer of it, and a collector of these figures. I'm like, what the hell? No, it's a bit, and I think too that has also been exemplified in recent years due to an influencer culture setup. You have people that's influencers. Someone for shock value to get followings that mean money. That's where it comes in too.
Yeah. And not only that, but you have the influencers that sort of like they start discussions, and they will steer those discussions into their favored lane, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of these people who are, to be quite honest with you, they have been built into the infrastructure, or they have found themselves being a part of the infrastructure, being part of the industry, and reaping benefits from that. And they seem to be like, they will try to steer the discourse into their favored direction. And I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but there's a podcast with I believe 3 AniTubers who, yeah, sometimes I'll listen to their stuff and I'll agree with a lot of their stuff, but at the same time, it just feels as if we're sort of more centralizing it around these people who have sponsorships and have companies that are getting them into Japan or hosting their stuff or doing their marketing for them. And I think that's sort of a dangerous direction to go into.
Yeah, The company I work for, that I'm the lead programmer to. When we have the other side of the company that does the app, like the marketing and so forth, we're the ones who do the hiring of these influencers for big brands like CPG companies and stuff.
Mm.
We're the ones who do some of that stuff. Those influencers, yeah, they're gonna pivot everything to making sure that they get more of that money and more of that work, and it's all going to go into that. It's not going to really go too much into maybe at one point it did go into their passion, but a lot of it will definitely be pivoted towards towards maybe not even them too as the influencer. It could be also some of a company like the company I work for be directing them, or the brand themselves be directing them how to move things and in that brand's vision. And that can be, that's not exactly it does go into the whole thing of when someone says someone's been sold out. It totally is that. It's you've been sold out. It's and so we have some of that there with some of these influencers and YouTubers too that have like a very decent following, especially ever since YouTube's and Google's algorithm has changed over, where really there's hardly any money made in the viewership of your content. It's all okay. You got enough viewership. Hopefully now, Raid Shadow Legends will come to your channel and pay you $7,500 to do a commercial in the video.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's gotten to that. So that's also that. Yeah. So a lot of that has been pivoted towards that. I could say it's work for a company that pays these influencers. It gets to that. Brands, and the brands would be the ones that dictate everything. They're the ones in charge. The brand managers of these companies. And everything. What goes into the concept.
It seems as if we're applying in the American entertainment industry model to the Japanese products when they come over here, which just flies in the face of what like the entire otaku space is built on. So if you look at Japan, you look at the anime industry in Japan, you have people who do fan works, like they'll do doujinshi and things like that. So, for instance, Kiyohiko Azuma, who wrote Azumanga Daioh and is writing Yotsuba, he started off selling Sailor Moon doujinshi that he drew. And then he signed on, he did a manga for Dengeki Daioh, which became an anime later on. And because people loved that so much, when he went on to make Yotsuba, that became like the thing that he's presumably doing for the rest of his life. So you have these people who will just come out of very humble beginnings and suddenly find themselves making it into the industry, and that's going all the way to like animators. You'll have people who come in and they just try out to be part of an animation studio. They get hired on. They might not be paid very well, but they're going to be making anime, and that's something that they have a lot of passion for. Meanwhile, the American model, it seems to be less about your ability and more about who you know. It's more of a networking kind of thing. And if you can find yourself making a show for CBS or something like that, it's because it's the people you know or the people you can kiss up to, rather than your talent or your abilities or who's looking for you. And I feel as if we seem to be going in that direction for the otaku space, which is something that we weren't made for. We didn't. This whole thing is that the whole thing with the otaku space versus the industry is that they're one and the same. They feed off of each other. They're more of like in a peer system rather than a top-down, this is the person who's funding it, this is the person who's creating it, and all the plebs who will buy it or view it or consume it in whatever such way. And that model doesn't work when it's applied to like anime and manga, because you don't have that class system so much. And I feel as if people are assuming that we should have a class system here, or that it's being forced upon us almost, if that makes sense. I might be saying it a little bit too negatively or tinfoil hatty, but it just feels as if we're applying that class system to something that fundamentally does not exist within that sort of structure. And Chuck especially has experienced this before. That might be a story for another time, but it shouldn't be about who you know, because this is something that we thrived and built this community off of, that sort of decentralized nature. And that's not to say that there's no big industry or anything like that. It's not to say that the entirety of the anime industry is all just like garage projects and things like that. But it's also to say that we're sort of like, we're distracting ourselves from the things that make anime so appealing and make being part of the community, which is a major part of being an anime fan that I can't stress enough. That is a major part of it. That's the major part of the experience of what you get from anime. It's not just foreign cartoons to us. It's a community. It's these conventions that unfortunately we haven't been able to go to for the past year and a half. And who knows when we're going to be able to go back to those. But it that sort of warmth, that sort of like insularness that we have with each other, and that seems to be either considered to be like gatekeeping in some way, like we're trying to keep people out of our special clubhouse, when that couldn't be further from the truth. It's not that we're keeping people out. It's more that we're a hard bunch to describe to people, because we're not going to fit your stereotypes. We're not going to fit your expectations. We're going to be of all stripes and tastes and all that stuff, and you're going to see us enjoying things or making jokes or things that you're not going to think are like, they're not really acceptable in generalized society. And that's not to say that we want to keep people out from that. It's that we want them to understand, we want them to be eased into understanding these things in the same way we were, as opposed to seeing it out of context or not see or seeing it as like some sort of like, oh, they're coming out of the woodwork kind of deal, like they were keeping away and all that stuff, but now we see how they really are, when it's like that's not the case at all.
It's been of all the, and this goes with other fandoms out there too, to a degree, but anime and anime particularly, and anime and manga particularly, are probably the most homogenous, very democratic between the actual content and the fandom, any other spot. And really, trying to put in the Western thought process of a hierarchy, kind of like a pyramid structure within the community, within the business, this Hollywoodness to it is a mistake. It's something I remember the person who got me into anime warned against way back when I first got into it. I was exposed to anime as soon as I was a year old. I do actually remember something that was when I finally figured out what it was. I was like, "Holy crap, that was an anime!" Okay,
yeah,
that was it. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" But I didn't recognize it as anime back then until I became an anime fan in like 1996, 97. And the person who got me into that, oh, sorry, my phone is buzzing. The person who got me into that, when I first was getting into anime, I was like, "Wow, what if this stuff becomes really popular? This would be awesome. We need to get into like the mainstream." He quickly warned. He was like, "No. Let's not. You don't want that to happen." I was, this is me when I was brand new into it, and he came in and said, like, "Listen, don't do that." And the person who got me into this, my old childhood friend named Tiago, he actually, he went and 1 second. Sorry, my mother-in-law has arrived too.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you see, also, I'm like, this going back to the stereotype. I'm a homeowner who's got a 2-year-old. I'm not some basement dweller.
Exactly.
I got like But also like when I got into the fandom, what I was saying too is that my friend named Tiago. He eventually went on. He became a person who worked at CNN. He worked over at Turner, and he was one of the people behind Cartoon Network for a good while during Toonami. And he was the one who got me into Toonami back then in like '96. He had me my thing. I went over to his house, and I still remember this to this day how the turn of events happened, which also led to me meeting my wife and everything else too. But it was I had a Sega CD that was system that was given to me from my dad's friend, and it was missing a plug. And I was like, hey, let me go over to my friend's house and see if we can plug this thing in and check it out. And he was playing Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, the English one, the very rare PlayStation 1 English dub of that was tough to find. It's very tough to find now. I think it's tough to find. And also Final Fantasy VII. And then when we were playing that, but then he was like, oh wait, I gotta step out. I want to go watch Sailor Moon on TV on Cartoon Network. And he felt like kind of embarrassed to tell me about it. And I said, don't worry about it. I knew of Sailor Moon from when it was first aired, even a couple of years prior to that. And in the original deep dub that came out, I think it came out relatively early for others compared to some of the other stuff. And then he was embarrassed about it, but he's the one that got me into it. And then, I could definitely tell you, he warned about what we're seeing now with like it getting too much of the mainstream and too much of the Western entertainment ideals becoming part of it. And because what a lot of people who detest anime or anime fans particularly don't realize is, again, all of us fans if you want to talk about diversity of money, diversity of careers, diversity of culture, and
gender, race, yes.
Yeah. Yep. We're some of the most wide variety you'll find in any other fandom anywhere already. So anyone trying to shoehorn stuff that prejudices against us with the modern, kind of woke topics they're barking up the wrong tree. This is the wrong area to do so.
That's what I don't understand is the where the stereotype of white males being into Japanese cartoons as if it's only specific to them. I don't know where that came from. And I definitely know that it came from outside, like people who have never been encountered anime fans, because they're saying, oh, this is a male dominated space. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like the entire, the way that the anime fandom came about, it was brought into the world essentially by women, these female creators who were creating like doujinshi is essentially invented by women. And if you go to any convention, you go to a convention photo shoot, 9 times out of 10, whoever's running the photo shoot, who put up the things on the forums and did the Facebook groups and all that stuff, who barks out, okay, now we're going to have this character and this character for this fan pairing, you're going to find a woman who I like to call them con moms. They're the ones who are calling the shots. And like,
look at a company like.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. No, sorry.
Look at these. It's a very matriarchal subculture. And I had been saying this for years, and then suddenly everybody is saying like, oh, it's all white males and stuff, and if you find an anime fan, they're going to be a white male in his 20s, and the Onion, there was an Onion article that said that 90% of Japanese speakers are white males who are 23, and all this kind of crap. And it's like, I don't know, the stuff is coming from I don't know where. It's just this, I don't know where that stereotype specifically came from, because it's
like to turn it around, I have to wonder what circles are these people running in where all of the anime fans they're seeing are white males.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Because when I joined my my high school anime club, it was overwhelmingly women or girls, because you can call them girls because they were teenagers, because it's a high school. But yeah, it was overwhelmingly girls. There were only a few guys, and of those guys, it was like there were about 4 or 5 guys, and only 2 of us were actually into anime. The other ones were like, oh, well, our video game club had to get shut down because of lack of interest or topic, so we just joined the anime club. And the funniest thing about it was I made a joke sometimes that it was a yaoi trading ring, because these girls would bring in their books and they'd go over into the corner and they'd swap out and they'd put them back into their bags, and then they go about with the club activities. And this was back in 2008, 2009, 2010. So we were watching like Gurren Lagann and Lucky Star and Hitalia when it came out. Don't say anything about the Hitalia stuff. But anyway. But yeah, that and that was the other thing, was when Hitalia came out, and it was like you'd go to the Hitalia photo shoots. I was one of maybe 2 or 3 guys. Everyone else were women. So I don't know where this idea that it's all white males or anything like that, where that came from, but it's a weird stereotype that has no basis in reality and needs to stop. Unless you're talking about the writing staff at a certain news network that talks about anime, then I guess you do have a point that it's all white men. But anyway, aside the point.
The news network that shoehorned them into all the conventions and claimed that they were the #1 news source just because they claimed it.
Yeah. They're the number one news.
I wonder what circles these people are running in.
Exactly.
They're seeing only white males into anime.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the most successful. They're the most successful anime. The most successful anime news source. They're so successful that they need to take cult money. So.
Yeah, and I know this is going back to like 2008 too, when me and my wife were going to conventions, and I was selling the figures, and I was able to get in as a retailer. So it was cool. I was able to come in and get like the 4-day pass for a decent amount of money, cheap, and go to New York Comic Con and at New York Anime Fest. Now I can tell you, when I was there, when me and my wife were there, it was really cool. We went to Anime Fest in 2008, and my wife lucked out. When I went to go see the voice actor of Speed Racer at the panel, my wife was out in the lobby, and the 2 main anime guests came over to her. The one who no one ever sees ever before, and actually took it and liked her dress and wanted to speak with her and took a picture with her. Kikuchi, the creator of Vampire Hunter D, when he came over. There's a picture of my wife with standing there having a picture, and he's like a very humble writer who's like at home. He doesn't really go out much, and he was there in America at the time. But I can tell you that in 2008, when New York, it was split. It was New York Anime Fest and it was New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
And I went to both at the time for 2 years, and I can tell you that it was night and day between the conventions at the time. You go into New York, you go to Anime Fest, diverse, happy-go-lucky, really fun group of people. Like they would piss off the staff at the Javits Center like crazy. They'd be stuck there so late. They'd be partying and be just like a really nice community. And then I went to New York Comic Con in 2008 and 2007, and I was like, what a night and day. It was like dead. It was like the people were just like, I'm just gonna look for my Iron Man comic. I'm just gonna look for this Iron Man comic, and that's it. And it was very dead. Not to bash anyone who likes Iron Man. I'm a big Iron Man fan, especially since the MCU with the tech and stuff. But the thing is, a good example was Sega had a booth. I still remember this to this day. Sega had a booth at New York Comic Con like 2008, and they did this really cool thing. They dressed up. They had all the booth people dressed up as zombies, and they were giving everyone zombie hugs and stuff like that. If they did that at New York Anime Fest, all the cosplayers were like, yeah, all right, awesome. Ooh, that's all cool. And the few cosplayers that were there at New York Anime Fest were just doing just that, while everyone else was sneering at them like, oh, what are these people doing? Are you having fun? And it's like, and then eventually what happened was New York Anime Fest got so popular, but then they merged the two together. And that's when New York Comic Con, and then they, of course, just rebranded it as New York Comic Con. and that's been the main thing since like 2011, 2012 was when it started to spiral. But it was like they needed to merge with the anime fans in order to get like the really good kind of like grouping together. And then they kind of just threw the anime fans into the back corner and said, you guys got the corner of the Japan Center. Here you go.
The anime ghetto.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was so fun. Like the community has been for a while so much more fun to be around with and everything, and not the stereotypes that everyone wants to say. If anything, the Western comic was showing more of that side, at least 10, 15 years ago, or more than that. It's more than this, but even then, that would be a lot. That would be judgmental to say that about that community as well. It's there's some people that with agendas that are coming in and trying to make up stuff because I think it might have worked for them doing with other places. It's not going to happen on the anime.
That's something that I said years ago, that people are on, whether this whole culture war thing that has nothing to do with anime and doesn't really have a place in the subculture. But there's people who keep on making this whole thing like, oh, there's going to be a Gamergate moment for anime. There's going to be an Anime Gate. And I've said this over and over. There's no fertile ground for that.
No.
Like, whether you want there to be a so-called Anime Gate for the reason you want it to be, or if you want there to be an Anime Gate so you can dismiss anime fans or the entire subculture, or smear them with some sort of stereotype or anything like that. That's not going to happen because it's patently false. There is no. It doesn't have a place to begin with, and it's just there. Our whole thing is that it is community is one of the pillars of the subculture. That's what separates us from like the comic book fandoms or any other like mostly Western fandoms or music fandoms, things like that. Is that community aspect? But
it's kind of baked into the history of the subculture.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you go all the way back in the day, back when it was tape trading, you categorically couldn't do this stuff on your own.
Yeah.
There needed to be small communities here and there of people just so people could have the opportunity to see this stuff. And I think that's carried through all the way to today. Just now it's being assailed on all sides by people who have particular agendas.
Yeah, that's... I don't know. I can't really speak to why this is happening, though. Whether I'm not going to go into some sort of tinfoil hat situation or anything like that. Sometimes I'll make jokes about it, but overall, I don't know what anybody would get from imposing some sort of like image of anime fans as this negative thing or something. Whether it's some sort of like social ostracization or what's going on there. But I've noticed a lot of the people who come in and say things like, I don't use the word otaku very often, not because I think it's a bad word or it has negative connotations nowadays, but because I'm tired of explaining the same thing over and over again. That it used to be a derisive term, but now it is more of a normalized term. And that's not speaking to how it is in America. I'm talking about how it is in Japan. And when people are saying, why do you call yourself an otaku? That means that you're a basement dweller, kind of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, that's not true. What you're talking about is you're getting your information from the early 2000s, and all of that we've moved past that for over a decade and a half now. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a hard time coming up with a reason why why it's necessary to portray people with otaku tendencies as something negative. And a lot of it just seems like just sort of basic social thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like this person is more or less in the same subculture as I am. Like, we like the same things, but we're so different that it causes a sort of clash. And I think part of it is that we like to talk about the anime community as a big, like, as a coherent thing, when I, it's it's not quite like that, like we portray it.
Mm,
Like, it's more of a collection of sub communities.
exactly. Like you could put me in a room with 10 different anime fans and I could very easily find almost nothing in common with them.
Right.
Or I will have things in common with them,
Yeah.
but it's like something that I don't feel extremely passionate about, or it's something that the other person has heard of or watched a little bit of and they don't feel passionate about that the same way I do, that kind of deal. And I also noticed that a lot of people say, "Oh wow, you're into old stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." And they're like, "You're still a Kill la Kill fan." And I'm like, "That was like 5 years ago?" I don't when I was forming myself within this subculture, we didn't really think of things from 5 years ago as being old, but now apparently that is like, if it's not a currently airing thing, that's considered old.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first getting into anime, when I know it was anime, in the 90s,
Hmm.
the stuff we were watching was coming out from late 80s, late to mid 80s, straight around. So already about 10 years old. Yeah, granted, also too, it was a little bit of the caveat too that the distribution was much slower. If it was official, it was actually dubbed, or but even then, like a lot of times we didn't watch it; it's subbed. I had a group of friends too who were they're definitely not your typical the stereotype. Who their introduction to anime, I remember it was their introduction to anime was Ninja Scroll.
Hmm.
That was the one. Oh, Ninja Scroll, yeah, because it's so violent and everything. We got like it was like there was people who you would definitely say were like broasters and stuff. They were the ones that they knew anime through Ninja Scroll back then. That was, and the Ninja Scroll. Ninja Scroll was not a mistake too, but it was still like it was yeah. It was, we still would watch stuff. We would watch like Pat LaBar. We would watch like older stuff. It wouldn't be a problem. Um, Heck, look at late '90s too. Like Lupin the Third was starting to get popularity, and that was from the '70s.
Yep.
Hmm. Yeah, Lupin is still going strong. There's still a big fandom around it, especially you had part 5 come out only a couple years ago, and you have the movie, that the CGI movie was absolutely wonderfully done. And on top of that, like I am not a big fan of dubs, but I make an exception for the Lupin the Third dubs, because
Yeah.
the thing that I like about it is that they're consistent about it. And you can say things against the localization they did for the part 2 dub, but they have moved past that and they've like learned from mistakes before, and they're a lot more respectful of the source material now.
Yeah, I have a little bit of bias towards that because my voice coach was his voice actor for a good chunk. Tony Oliver was my.
Hmm.
So that was where I got my training.
Wow.
What's funny is I've yet to voice an anime, but I was trained with voices in anime. With Bang Zoom Studios and Tony Oliver being the teacher all the time there. He was my teacher. So that's how I learned voice acting was through him. And it was funny is he was the voice of Lupin. He also was involved with a couple of other things too. And I found that out from the classes. He was very much the producer behind Power Rangers. The Power Rangers localization that happened with Saban and everything. It was mostly him on the set doing a lot of helping out the actors to kind of do that localization from Sentai, from Super Sentai. I still, despite a lot of what some of the studios are doing really bad lately, in terms of like some of them not doing some. It's not as bad as some people will say, but some of them are doing some stuff. It's like I say Bang Zoom does its best to at least to try to keep the culture, to keep the message that was in there intact. But again, that's also coming from a bias because I was trained under them. But I still have yet to see an anime despite that. And also here's another. That's what I was going to say too. He was also. This goes back to. Remember, if you were really going back far enough, and you were like, wait a second.
Oh no! Don't worry about that right now. Sorry, technical issue.
I think I got there.
I'm still here. That's not going to work. Okay. My apologies. We are having technical difficulties. My apologies for the technical difficulties, but we've brought everything under control again. And as you were saying, Chuck, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't know if you guys remember this. This is maybe going far back. Do you remember the Grimm Fairy Tales adventures that was on Nickelodeon way back in like the late 80s, early 90s?
Hmm?
The one that was also a lot of the voice acting. I think even the one of the directors behind that was also. So it was interesting. It's like a lot of this stuff was for us back then was very much. It didn't discern itself as anime so much. It took its time to ease in and then learn about the culture and learn about it all. Going back to what you were saying, it is easier to get to see all of it all displayed at you at once, and then of course people are. In fact, we all are definitely multiple backgrounds. But yeah, I just thought that was another anecdote. I just remember that he was also involved in that one. So there's some things that go back to where you have people that are in the industry that are they do the localization, and then it goes into play. Like sometimes the localization was still good, even if it wasn't exactly 100% to what it was there at the time. But I feel like now we do want to have a better because of everything. It's so cool. It's like you want it to be. As I feel, I want it to be as close to these sources. Well, I think that's also too going back to the subgroups, because a lot of them would just not. They would translate it almost one to one, or at least, or just show the information.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't mean to go off on something like there. But yeah, that's the voice actor is. I'm a little bit biased. So that was my.
Yeah.
But Lupin, actually, I have not seen the new one. It looks amazing. Was it really? If you don't mind giving a quick review, it is actually really as good as the trailer made it out.
Yes, it is absolutely as good as the trailer. It's spectacular CGI. Shading, everything is wonderful. The one issue that I have with it is you don't have a problem with lip flaps with dubs in like 2D animation, but watching a dubbed 3D animated show was kind of off-putting for me. That was the only complaint I have about it, is that it was the lip flap thing. It just it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel it's like when you're watching a dubbed anime, it feels a little bit more natural. But watching a dubbed CGI thing, it feels as if you know that you're watching something that's being dubbed.
So I guess it looks like for the 3D they had to lip sync around the voice actors. It was not ADR.
Yeah.
It was actually like they animated the 3D like what we do. It's prelay. It's what's known as prelay animation. Yeah. It's basically they prelayed the voice actors did their dubs, did their role, did their voice, and then the animators went around that. Most anime, even in Japan, is ADR. So when people when people say like the original sub is the voice acting, it's actually in 9 out of 10 times it's a dub as well. The Japanese are dubbing over it too.
Yeah,
they're dubbing over the flaps. So it's but also that leads to that's also what a line director and a localization person is supposed to do when it comes to skill set, is to take as close as possible to what was being said, not only translate it right, but make sure it matches the flaps as best. That's tough. I can see that being tough.
Immensely difficult thing. Going back to Final Fantasy X, the reason why the script felt so strange and stilted and stiff and weird wasn't because they weren't taking their job seriously. It was that they had to do the dubbing, and it was just so difficult for them because it was all pre-rendered. They couldn't re-render it around the new voice lines. They had to match it up to what like the lip flaps and everything on a pre-rendered CGI. So I think the one of the writers for the localization for Final Fantasy X said it was like trying to write haiku while balancing on a basketball. I think he said.
Yep.
And that was like a major thing that just was very difficult for them. And also because it was like dubbing games was in its infancy at this point as well.
Yeah, and I can tell you that when it comes to difficulty level with voice acting, video games is considered the hardest.
Yeah.
Even as for the voice actor themselves. The second would be anime. When I do my voiceovers, I'm just reading a script and I'm going based on that, and it's for most of my current role mostly is of Crusoe, and he's a live dog, so it's like voicing over. Like a good example we like to use internally of like my voice for him is almost like Wishbone. It's like dubbing over Wishbone. So that's easier. That's easier to do and be more natural to than it is to dub with the lip flaps. I know when I was with Bang Zoom and I was doing the voice acting lessons. There's a juggle between the lines are quick. They're very simple per take. You're not reading a whole paragraph out usually. However, you are going with the beeps and the timings and the flaps, and then trying to act around it. So it's a lot. But then you got to do that plus do like at least 3 to 4 takes, good takes for video game. It's a lot. It's a lot more intensive than that. It's not. It can be a little tough for that. For the voice acting on that end. And also, I can tell you the developer side too, because I do the development side. Like I've done Unreal Engine and Unity, and that stuff gets. But yeah.
So if I could return, if I could return to a previous topic about like the idea that anime, like nobody knows anything about anime in Japan. It's like very like it's not anywhere near as popular as it is in the United States and stuff. That's another narrative that I have no idea where that came from. But you guys will not be able to see this, but I'm going to be showing a slideshow. I went to museum. It's a ship museum in Japan. If you might be able to catch it on the live stream, I'm showing a slideshow now, and it's a museum ship for the Japanese battleship Mikasa, which was instrumental. It was a flagship during the Russo-Japanese War, and this is sort of a huge treasure in Japan. And even there, when I went to look there, it was covered in Azure Lane promotions, because they had recently made a character for the Mikasa in the game, and they had all of these promotions. Like, it wasn't just outside, like it was inside the ship as well. And I'm going to find the pictures now. Hold on. I'm just skipping over a lot of really cool stuff that I wish I could talk more about right now, but it doesn't really pertain to the discussion here. But this was the ship of it was the flagship of Admiral Togo Heihachiро, and it's considered one of the most important museum ships in the world, never mind Japan. The guest book had all these little, like the guests would do these little doodles of the recent character, and this is inside the ship, but there are all of this art officially from Azure Lane, from World of Warships, of these characters, and it's like character art, standees, and all that kind of stuff. And this is on the most treasured museum ship in Japan. And that was something that kind of blew me away, because like when I first went to Japan, my whole thing was, I've been told a lot of stuff. Some of it's going to be true, some of it's going to be false. And I'm not going to know which is going to be true and which is going to be false until I actually go there. And even just going around Japan, it's not just in Akihabara. You'll see like an advertisement for a parking garage, and it has a moe anime character. And it's just, this stuff has sort of it's part of the culture at this point. Like, I will transition over to this. This is in Yokosuka. It is an advertisement for a parking garage that's nearby, and it's just an anime girl. So when people go on this whole thing like, oh, anime, like nobody likes anime outside of your otaku weirdos, and all the otaku weirdos get made fun of all the time. No, that's not the case. I'll actually send this into the chat if I can. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at the stream too on YouTube separately.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. It's gonna be a few seconds behind. So
this kind of gets into some of the stuff I talk about, where it's like a lot of the cultural product of anime is more or less marketing.
Yeah.
And that's something, quite honestly, that's something I think that should be embraced.
Cute stuff sells.
Yes, exactly.
It gives you a nice feeling. We should be embracing that. We shouldn't be like, oh, being an adult is all about being miserable and mowing your taxes and filing your lawn, that kind of crap. That's over. We are in an era of unprecedented peace, prosperity, wealth, and abundance. We shouldn't be fetishizing being miserable.
Exactly.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Like the Western, I can tell you from like the brands that I deal with, CPG brands and stuff, they're still on the West side. A lot of them still have been keeping the trend of minimalism on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that with some of the logos and stuff. And the problem is, this clashes with the tech that they want to do too. I keep telling them, say, listen, your simple you're simplifying your designs and everything. Is screwing up on stuff. Like I've done stuff with PepsiCo and one of their sub brands, and we wanted to do an AR targeting thing with like using image recognition, and and this is something we did like 2 years ago with one of those brands, and they're and it's like, well, the targeting wasn't working. Why? Because their logo was too simple. The stuff works if you have something that's more complex with contrast and colors and patterns that are unique and stuff. That's how you can actually get the tech to work right. And their branding mantra was actually clashing with the actual movement in tech. Had to be like, look at an anime brand or like logos of like anime companies or what they're doing, say, on these billboards and stuff. That will actually work better as an AR tracker than any of like the Western brands who are constantly doing this like this mantra of minimalism. It's only hurting that, and I think some of that prejudice comes from that, but that's only like a minor side. I think it's also, again, you get the whole mentality of like, oh, you're an adult and everything. You need to just be sitting there bored with fiddling your thumbs while you stare at flower pottery in your curio cabinet. It's like, no, there's more to life than just that and mowing your lawn.
It's
when
this.
You have all that.
Yeah, it's this idea that we need to start homogenizing things. I don't know if you've heard of the meme of Allegria, I believe it's called. It's a minimalist art style that you see used in advertising for mostly like IT products. Facebook uses it. I think a couple of magazines and newspapers in New York use it. But it's this homogenized flats. Everybody, all of them have like this like ethnic ambiguity, all this kind of stuff. And they're what they're trying to do is make something that's comforting, or you can't like project onto it something that's like would be considered like negative or anything like that. But at the same time, it's just very off-putting. And meanwhile, in Japan, they're going more for like the cutesy stuff, the things that give you good feels kind of deal. And I think that's a lot more successful than this idea of we don't want to make anybody feel out of place, so we're going to be using this homogenized style that it doesn't look human, but we're trying to make it's like an ersatz human kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. It's like it's almost like someone tried to modernize cave paint. So.
Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. Yeah, you're right though.
It's such a weird design. I don't like it either. It's such a especially since I work in before COVID I was working in New York City, right in Williamsburg, and a lot of the advertisements near there too was very much. And also I work in tech, and all of them are this like the same kind of like really dull, simplistic style of which maybe it's fine on its own, but when everything is doing it, it's like like, okay, this should not be a trend. This should just be like an outliner thing, and and also, but then of course see the opposite. I just yesterday I was going to maybe even share it on Twitter. I wasn't sure how new it was, but I saw a Miku Hatsune music video, and I was like, wait, this looks new, and it was from a year ago, so it is relatively new. Mm-hmm. And her design and everything, the colors, there's so much pattern. It's really good. It almost looks like the 3D. It almost looks like the CG that's in the Lupin movie we were talking about. Like the motion to it was decent CG, and her outfit was like super colorized compared to normal. And she already has a lot of color too, her green and the gray and the blue and stuff. But there's like it was like rainbow colors everywhere. But it worked, and it looked really cool, and it was really neat. It was definitely maybe a little bit of sensory overload, but you can tell that the Japan is more on the cutesy, on the more complex designs when it comes to marketing versus the West is continuing to do this minimalism that just, I don't know. It irks me too, especially since I started web design back when it first was starting, and originally the goal was not to. It was all like have these really cool Flash websites and have all these different bells and whistles to them and really cool designs and artwork. Now it's like everything has to look like a single colored like blob.
Yeah. The whole thing is that it feels as if being inspired towards something seems like a negative thing almost. It feels like everything's becoming like less emotional. It's less driven. It feels there's no inspiration. Is the whole thing.
It's like authenticity is negative.
Yeah.
Like being authentic to anything further than I just want to appeal to as many people as possible.
And it seems to feed into the, and this has been dying, and good riddance to it, but the idea of I don't care, therefore I am cool. Like, cool people don't care about things. Like, cool people don't look back at the explosion kind of deal. And that seems to be, thankfully, going out of style for more like something more authentic. But it seems as if, like, yet again, the marketing is always several years behind the trend.
Yeah, I can attest to that on when I've seen from some of the big brands. They're behind on not just the tech, but just the trends too. And also, it's kind of funny when you see them try to dive into memes that have a shelf life of maybe 2 weeks. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, guys, that doesn't work. Can't. No.
Nah. That is a major issue. But it's also this is something that Anubis talks about a lot as well. How you can't the binge model of watching things, or the model that like Netflix or Hulu are, or mostly Netflix, less so Hulu. The model that they're going for is like this idea of binge watching, of releasing everything in bulk at once. That's something that a lot of streaming services, like the major streaming services, like when we used to have Amazon Strike or Anime Strike on Amazon, and the anime that comes out on Netflix as so-called Netflix originals, when they're not, those end up being failures, or they end up being panned by audiences, or they don't get the traction that they would get if they were simulcast, or even if they weren't even simulcast, if people were only getting them through like pirating. Is that these, unless a company understands the subculture, they're not going to have a great time marketing to the subculture, because they fundamentally don't understand who they are selling the product to.
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of ways, the business infrastructure we built around anime here in the West is kind of the opposite of how things work, how things tend to work over in Japan.
Even the same sites too. For instance, Netflix in Japan doesn't do the binge dumping of shows that they have on Netflix Japan. Like, I don't know if they did this with Little Witch Academia, but they do it with, I believe, Terrace House. They do simulcasting of Terrace House on Netflix in Japan, but you have to wait several months for it to come out in the United States.
Right.
And that it's the way that American entertainment works doesn't compute for marketing or streaming or selling anime.
Right. And when you try and shoehorn it into working into a more American type of system,
yeah,
it kind of works, but far from ideal.
Exactly.
Like, on some level, the business model of trying to sell the anime as a product isn't even how it's supposed to work. Because in Japan, the anime is made to sell not just the anime as a product, but the light novel it was based on, and whatever games end up getting made from it, and the figures that are coming out, and all the companies involved in that get a piece of that pie.
The bulk
But
of
so
the
when it comes,
the bulk of the return on investment is well after the airing. They're not what the show itself, just the show on its own, is not what's going to make the most money.
Exactly. But then when you get over to the US, all of that is licensed out, so one company has the rights to the anime, The other company has the rights to the light novel. Another company has the rights to the game. And all of those companies have to sell the anime as a product. They have to do something that the anime itself wasn't meant to do when it was created.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I remember just going years back too when Tokyo Pop left the States because they were just upset about the were back 2008, 2009. They're like, oh, we can't sell enough because of piracy and all this, and it's just like, well, I guess you guys just don't understand your demographic, your market at all. You know,
Yeah.
it's just it goes into some of that of like, you know, the whole thing. The anime is the advertisement. It is not the product. It is the product, but it's not it's advertising the true product.
Right.
You know.
Well, the other thing, Tokyo Pop and ADV and all the rest of them that went belly up back then, what they were dealing with was a terrible economy as well. So there were a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just people were pirating, therefore we had to go out of business. Piracy is killing us. It's a lot of different situations that just like culminated in that happening. And to be honest, it was a long time coming.
Yeah, and when I was selling the figures, the yen versus dollar comparison was at its worst in decades. And that was because of the crash in 2000. You know, the economic crash that we had from mortgages and everything. That caused the dollar to slump in value, and Japan does not make good money from the U.S. dollar being too weak. It actually makes it better when it's stronger. And that affected Japan too at the time. And I remember that when, you know, trying to do the conversion rates, and I did eventually get another wholesaler. Outside of that one, I actually tried to go over their heads a couple times, and I did get one wholesaler who was directly in Japan. I used to do wire transfer. I used to do the direct wiring, and I would see that firsthand of like the ratio, which is much better now. It's, you know, I think it's like roughly $100 yen to the dollar now. Back then it was 120, 130 yen to the dollar, something like that. And it was more expensive to do stuff that would have been, you know, the same thing just a couple years prior. So that also attributed to it. It wasn't the piracy and stuff. It's like, no, you got to remember the piracy, and let's go back to the, you know, the homogenous setup. The homogeneousness of it, of the community, and the sharing of it. It is part of where the strength is. You know, the gray market of the piracy totally does help the thing, and it does help the whole industry. Yeah, there's some cases where it might not, and some individual spots it might screw it up, but overall, that still is the bread and butter of getting the word out for certain things, especially outside of Japan.
Yeah, that's yeah, it was something that, like, you had the 2008 financial crisis, but that had knock-on effects going on for years. For example, in New England, we used to have, or in, like, northern New England, used to have several different anime shops. We had Animadness in, I believe, Waltham, Mass. We had, there were a couple places on Newbury Street in Boston. There was Tokyo Kid, which was in Cambridge near Harvard Square. And all of these companies, they just dropped like flies, or all these stores just dropped like flies one after another in around like 2011, 2012. And it was this knock-on because of the yen to dollar exchange, because all of their stuff they were selling all imported stuff. So they were heavily dependent on the dollar to yen exchange. And when that just made them go belly up after that. And these were wonderful stores, and I absolutely love going to them. And now we only have a very scant few anime shops, and even then, there was one that was up the street from me that went out of business because of the more recent events. Last year, their contract was up for their lease, and they were going to sign on for a new lease. And then after the shutdown started, they decided not to sign on for a new lease, and they just went out of business after that because they couldn't afford to have a storefront, and because of the it was just economically unfeasible for them. But there was another one that opened a couple towns over, and they seem to be less doing imported stuff and more fan works and things like that. So it's not like, I don't think they have like Nendroids or anything like that, but they do like the acrylic standees and the light up things like that. Things of that nature. They don't do the imports so much, but there's demand for it. It's just they're going for a different model to be able to stay in business and still bring things to people. But regardless, it's a difficult business to get into unless you're sort of diversifying what you have on offer. I'm actually doing some consulting for a sort of an up-and-comer in this industry, in this sort of retail environment, and we're going to start, I'm actually staffing his booth as well, and we're going to be going to conventions when those start up again. But he just noticed that there was a significant lack in that import business model, that he wants to take advantage of that, of the fact that there's very few people who are doing that anymore, and there's a lot of people who are sort of, who have that as something that they want to go out and they want to do these things. But his main thing is that he wants to diversify what he's putting on offer. It's not just anime figures. He wants to do something more along the lines of what J-List is doing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And that is a vertical that's not seen much here in the States still.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Something I might maybe could have dabbled into years ago, had that whole stuff. Yeah, it's funny because I've speaking of J-List, I've spoken a couple times. It's been a while, but yeah, I used to talk with them. Again, even amongst the retailers, it's still a community, even though we're competition. It's like, still like, hey, we're all just fans of this stuff. So we want the fandom to continue to grow, because then that helps our business and our love of the craft, of the stuff.
It's not just the whole, they want to make money off of a certain market. It's more of a, I'm into this stuff and I want to see this kind of stuff happen. That's why I started getting into patches and making patches, because I've seen these tactical style patches which are anime themed, and I want to see more of those. It's just, I have designs that I want to see out there. It's not that, I see this as a market that I can take advantage of, because I know I'm not going to be making money off of this for a long time, and I'm never going to be able to be at the level that I'm going to be living off of that alone. But it's just a passion project that I want to do, and all of the money that goes into it, all the money that it generates goes straight into going into the next product, the next line.
I think that's something a lot of people miss, is that a healthy market for this stuff is kind of imperative if we want the subculture to remain healthy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The culture will see right through a business plan being done for strictly business.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
They'll look right through it and be like, okay, I see what you're doing. I mean, I think Crunchyroll is one that took it on the chin when it came to their new office space that they set up.
Yep.
It was like, that was one example of like, I see what you guys are doing. I mean, it's a cool office space, but
who is it for?
Yeah.
Who is it for? And my thing was, okay, when you think of anime, you think of a place in Tokyo that you go to because you love anime. Like, when you're a huge anime fan, the first place that you go to in Tokyo is this place. You know the one. It's right here in Shibuya Scramble Crossing? What? That was the whole thing. That's what made it feel so inauthentic to me. First of all, is that they made it as a break area for their staff, which they don't have most of like who works on the product and works at Crunchyroll, like in the building. Like you think, okay, who's going to be doing the translation and the localization? People they contract out to. Who's going to be making the user interface? People they contract out to in an East European country. So, okay, this is a place for, I guess, the marketers? Like what do they do in house? They just do their YouTube videos where they put Vienna sausages in curry. I would never do. Or cheese. Oh god. I hated that video. Anyway, but they made a stylistic like break area for everybody, and for their anime company they made it based off of Shibuya Scramble Crossing. Is less of an anime thing and more of like a Shibuya K thing. It's more of a fashion thing than an anime thing. So it just felt very tone deaf there, what they were deciding on their theme, and also the fact that no person who pays for a Crunchyroll membership is ever going to be in that building. Just felt very, very wrong to me.
It's that plus the whole marketing thing with support the industry,
but they're using the money to make they're using the money to try to make a place for their employees rather than make a product that is better for the consumer. Which I recently, my lady bought a Crunchyroll membership for the first time in 2 years because we couldn't use it because it was we couldn't use their streaming service. It wouldn't play anything. Whether it was on our PS4 or our Roku or our computer, it wouldn't play anything. And we could watch things on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, but for some reason, Crunchyroll wasn't working. So now that we live in a new place and we pay for a decent speed of internet, we decided, hey, maybe we can start watching this again. Maybe over the past 2 years, they've made the product better, and it's still a very janky product that doesn't work.
Yeah. I have the Roku one, and it's I have to sit there and let it load for 5 minutes before I actually see anything on the screen other than the shiny loading animation.
Yeah, it just shows you the boxes where text will come up eventually, and it's just shining over that for like 3 minutes. Or when you're like, okay, I finished watching this episode, I'm going to watch an episode of a different show, and you X out of, or you back out of that, and you're just met with a black screen. And you can hear the UI thing, like if you push the down button or the up button or the side button, you can hear it selecting new things, but it doesn't show you anything. It's just a black screen.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least it plays things when it feels like it, which is an improvement from when I was using it.
Yeah, and I've been only using it for three series. It was Yashahime, Attack on Titan, recently, I think. Oh no, 4. It would be The Promised Neverland, and also recently Jujutsu Kaisen.
So aside from Jujutsu no Kaisen, all of those are on Netflix or Hulu now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, should I really still have it? And I used to, on my site for a number of years, I was being nice to them. I was constantly, I'd get like a free thing, and I'm like, hey, here's a free subscription for like 24 hours. Put it on there. But then when they started doing some weird stuff, I was like, all right, guys, and this, just like I did with Kotaku, and just like I did with Anime News Network. Hey, guys.
Just
When they start to, anytime I see the community getting shafted by these, okay, well, no. No.
That's
that was my mentality.
Yeah, it's my whole thing is I knew for a long time that Crunchyroll was doing things that I didn't like. But at the same time, I was like, it's still a serviceable product. And then I moved into a new place and I had slightly different internet. And for some reason, like, it just, like, going from like 100 megabits per second to something like 60 or 70, which was still more than enough for every other streaming service. It's just Crunchyroll decided, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I decided, and it wasn't a consumer boycott like you did something I don't like. It was I can't use your product and you
Right.
refuse to listen to me when I
Yeah.
give you feedback. Therefore, this can't go on anymore. Like if you can't give me a decent
Yeah.
product, I'm not paying for something.
I mean, I know the software that I've built, I've helped build with things that definitely had its share of bugs sometimes too.
Yeah.
But like, you know, when it comes to a shippable product and stuff that people are paying money for constantly, I know there's stuff I've seen that they have on the thing that I've been drilled for far less. You know, and it's like,
Mm.
you know, for stuff that was only a lot of the stuff I build are things that are only available for like a month or two as like a promo for a company, and then that's it. It's like not something that's an ongoing product, except for something I am working on right now. But it's, you know, been a year, so it's like
Mm.
it's yeah. There's stuff wrong with their UI and everything that I would be told, I'd be grilled, like, you know, this is not a service. You can't service it. It's not a product. You can
Yeah.
have stuff.
And this is something that Anubis said as well, is that we're not talking about whatever your pet peeve culture war crap is or anything like that. It's fundamentally or even this whole narrative of supporting the industry when Crunchyroll over its entire lifetime makes up less than, I believe, 1% of all overseas uh, revenue that Japan has generated for anime of 1 year. So 1 year of the revenue that they make from overseas in Japan, less than 1% of 1 year is what Crunchyroll has generated for them throughout their entire existence. Meanwhile, Crunchyroll is making their workspaces all nice and themed over different things, and it's just like that felt wrong. And when you look at their product and their product fundamentally doesn't work on half of your devices and the other half it isn't even available for them anymore, it just feels like it's just wrong. And beyond just being upset about things, it's, can I use your product? No, I'm not going to use your product.
Right, exactly. And on some level, it feels like kind of an FU
Yeah.
because the service straight up hadn't worked for me for a long time. This is before I canceled my subscription. The service straight up didn't work for me for a long time. Meanwhile, they're spending a lot of money on things that are basically marketing. So like they started their own convention, they're starting their own award show. Now they're getting into gaming and they're doing weird stuff with that too. So it feels like, okay, if you pay for our service but aren't actually receiving our service because it doesn't work, it's not a big enough concern compared to having to having to market to more people so we can sell more of our service that doesn't work, that's not going to work for a number of them.
I didn't even go
Yeah.
over my first issue with Crunchyroll either here. My first issue was they used to have a system where you could pay for a subscription to watch simulcast anime, and you could pay extra to get manga. And I paid for a year of that, a year of the anime plus manga subscription. And then when it came up for renewal, I paid for the year of anime plus manga subscription. But then a week after I renewed, they offered live manga for free on the anime subscription and didn't give me anything back for it. They didn't say anything about if you bought into the manga subscription, we're going to give you, I don't know, like $25 off a purchase on our store, even though they were well above what most places were charging for merchandise anyway. I think it was like $10 extra for an Android than if you could find it on like say Chuck's website or anywhere else, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, they didn't. They changed the tiers. Didn't say anything about it to me to anybody who bought in for the Anime Plus manga thing, and that was the first time I was burned by them. So it just felt yeah. It feels as if they're not part of the community, which is a major thing that just doesn't fit right with me.
They feel like a startup that's failing upwards until they get enough funding.
I mean, that's essentially what they've been doing since the beginning.
Yeah.
And the whole the possible buyout by Sony, too. It's like they're looking. The people who will benefit from that expansion on The Office are the only ones that will benefit from that kind of business choice and that's everyone else doing all the work. People who are contracted out, ones who are actually putting their nose to the grindstone are going to be left out as they continue to. That's what I've seen that with startups. I've seen it all.
Exactly. I used to work for a company that we were bought out by a big corporation that had a very, very similar company under their wing in another part of the country. But that company was doing pretty poorly, even though they were larger than us. And I just watched as this company that bought us out, they just looked at the way that we did things, tried to adopt it at their other location, and then laid us all off.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's if this whole thing with Funimation and Crunchyroll goes through, I'm afraid that's going to happen to either the Funimation side or the Crunchy side, and I think it's going to happen to the Crunchy side. But that's all in the future if it happens at all, because the government's getting involved in that as well. And I love their argument that we're not making a monopoly over something. It's just like The Simpsons or something. What was their defense against that?
They're asserting that anime isn't a distinct market and is more just a subsection of the larger market of animation for adults, which would include stuff like The Simpsons.
That is, first of all, that's stupid because anime is for all ages. And there's so many different age brackets. They actually have names for the demographics, like shonen and shoujo and things like that. It's just also it's. I'm gonna dovetail into something else here. Another issue that I had with Crunchyroll is that there were so many, and this added to toxicity online, was that people were exposed to, I believe it was Goblin Slayer, and they were just shocked by what they saw. And that's the problem where you go onto the front page of Crunchyroll and you see all this stuff trying to say, watch Goblin Slayer. And it's like if somebody got into anime by watching My Hero Academia or something like that, they're going to think, oh, Goblin Slayer, these characters look cute and stuff, and then they're going to see the first episode, and what's that going to do to them? On top of that, Crunchyroll still does not, I believe they might have a little bit of functionality in this, but they don't have a rating system. You can't just put your 8-year-old kid on the iPad in front of Crunchyroll and they're going to find all this kid-friendly content. Yeah. And that's something that I said this over and over to their marketing person, and he ended up blocking me. So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm shocked my daughter gravitates towards the Inuyasha. I have to be
Mm.
careful because she actually loves it. Like the Yashihime girl, she loves. I mean, that one's a little bit more tame than but she will go right to the Inuyasha manga and on our bookshelf and start trying to read it. And I'm like, I mean, it's good. I mean, for a 2-year-old, mean, I gotta do gotta put a little bit of breaks here and there, but at the same time, I'll be happy when she's able to, and have the choice to. She's a little bit older to handle some of the violence and stuff that's in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is no rating system with some of that, and that can be a problem. Plus, also, yeah, it's especially a jump from My Hero Academia to like Goblin Slayer, or even like going to the series I'm watching right now, Jujutsu Kaisen. It's like it's got its moments, or like, oh shit,
Mm.
excuse my French, excuse my, it's like, oh crap, there's shoot, sorry,
No, it's fun.
oh shoot, they it's like, whoa, some bunch of people just got set on fire, gruesomely out of
Yeah.
nowhere, despite like a little bit of cutesiness going on. It's like, but then again too, that's also again, I come from the 80s 90s animes where I got my start, and that was yeah, you would have those kind of swings. You'd have all the cutesy stuff, and then all of a sudden, some really crazy space mech gore going on.
Yeah. People getting shocked by what they see in Madoka or something like that. Like they're expecting
Yeah.
something that's going to be like cute and wholesome and stuff like that, and it's like all of this stuff is mixed together into like something that will feel cute at some points and morose at other points. And it's another thing that adds to the like culture shock kind of deal. There's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I remember vividly was actually I don't remember it vividly. I was I even in the same room? I don't remember. My girlfriend's parents watching Summer Wars. It's a Mamoru Hosoda film. They were watching that and they were disgusted with there was a bath scene. And that's something that like in Japanese anime that like nine times out of 10 you have a bath scene, it's not played up for like sexual like titillation or anything like that. It's just like a funny situation and stuff. But you put that into an American context, and there's a whole lot of problems that are going to be arising from that. Which that's something that isn't really a major issue in Japanese society, and that's another thing that I'm seeing a lot of American morality being applied in the fandom of Japanese media now. That just seems to be a culture shock issue that we dealt with every once in a while back in the day, but now it's just pretty much every week there's somebody complaining about gyaru being equated to minstrel shows and all sorts of things like that. It's just like, no, this isn't. These are two different things that you're equating together, and you're just dealing with culture shock. But you can't have that conversation anymore.
I wonder what some of them might feel if they saw like some of the Shin-chan stuff showing off his elephant.
Oh yeah.
It's all like but it's all like it's done. Especially in Japanese culture, it's meant as it's a comedy thing. It's not in any way. We take things a little too weirdly here in the West. It's like you're not. You take it too deep. You don't take it at surface value is at the top. It's not something that it's a comedy thing.
Yeah, and it's a comedy thing, but like it's especially bad when you look into things like when things have been played up in localizations that completely change like even who can watch it. For instance, when Hitalia came out in Japan, it was rated for children. It was on television for children.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it was published in the US with a dub, it's TVMA. Like, what happened there? Like, is that simply just a cultural difference, or is there something a little bit deeper to that?
Yeah. Heck, even it reminds me of on Netflix. Look at the series I talked about, Kuma. The whole thing is it's if you look at the ratings on it, it's rated PG, saying gore and violence. And if you watch the show, you're like, what the hell is it? And it's literally from 2 parts, and there's like, because it is a little bit of like multiple age stuff, but it's still aimed at kids. But it's aimed at both. It's aimed at both kids and adults who are stuck in the work rut. It's very the Japanese work rut of like an acceptance of your parents with Kairu and stuff, and she's there, and then you just have these mascots that are part of like products in Japan that are part of the house. There's 2 scenes that entirely would you have a truck-coon scene. There's definitely the truck coon scene. There's definitely like this ghost girl episode. This girl comes in and she's a ghost just in there. There's all claim. It's like not claymation. Well, it's with models, like it's stop motion animation. Just sitting there, the girl's there, but then they have like an animated, like it is a little bit of a 2D animated scene where the girl reminisces when she died, and she crossed the street and got hit by a truck. But it wasn't like too gory or anything. But it was just all of a sudden you had this quick like diversions in what happened with the girl that died, and it's not in Japan. It's not seen as much as telling the story. Here, it's like, oh my god, why is that being shown? And then there's another scene too where the main character, she's having a choice between, she doesn't know what she likes when it comes to guys or something like that, or just in general with life, and it manifests itself as like a daydream of two guys in summer shorts. Showing off their chest, saying, "Is it does she like edamame or tokiyaki? Edamame and tokiyaki is two different guys there, so there's a little bit of that, but it's like that's it in the entire thing of. But it's like, but for the Japanese culture, that's like they're not gonna take it as seriously as we do here. Here, everyone's like, oh my god, why are you having your kids see that? It's more comedy and or not as taken as seriously as
We're taking ourselves too seriously is the issue.
Yeah. I think in a lot of things, you see it on Twitter all the time. People go way too out of I think you can blame a little bit of the medium of the site for that, the way it's catered to everyone, but also just in general, I think when it comes to nuance and conversation, it's really taken a back seat, because everyone's taking stuff like everything's an insult. Every disagreement is an insult / harassment. It's not. It's like, all right, I just humbly disagree. That's that's part of human discussion, and here in the West we take stuff way too seriously. That's also why to the culture, some people don't like the happy-go-luckiness that us anime fans will have. Generally speaking, historically, like being like a little nonchalant and joking and like it too. It's like utilizing the medium. It's and so, but you got people who just everything is super serious all the time. It's like, no, take a moment and step back and.
It's that, I guess overall. Like, if we could just overall arch this together, because it felt as if we got off topic, but at the same time it was still on topic.
Yeah.
That you need to have that passion. Like, this is stuff that we're very passionate about, and it's something that we're spending a lot of money on. Like there are people who will spend hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars for figures and merchandise. And you need to have some sort of good acumen about how you're running your finances. You have to first of all have a decent income to be able to engage in these things, and second of all, you have to be able to have a good like financial understanding of your limitations, and I can buy these figures, but I also need to feed myself, I need to house myself, I need to clothe myself, and you need to be able to do that. And it's like, you're not going to be going out to the bar and getting like a pint of some sort of import beer, like 5 pints in a night, and they're all like $10 a pint kind of deal. You're going to be like rigidly understanding your finances and what's coming in and what's going out. You have to be making that money, and that means you can't be like just in the basement of your parents' house or anything like that. But at the same time, like you have that passion, and that's something that really like it's something that's inspiring you to actually go towards this stuff. It's inspiring you, like we didn't even get into talking about the media that we're watching, especially like people who are into sports animes and things like that, who are it's like that passion that they see in these characters, and they want to be more like this character who's giving it their all to like win the tournament before senpai graduates without winning a tournament kind of deal. And it can be applied to so many different things. But we get a lot of our a lot of inspiration out of this stuff, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand. They just see people watching cartoons and say, oh, they're living in mom's basement, and it's always the same hackneyed jokes, and it just doesn't really apply anymore if you really look into it.
Yeah, people see an adult watching cartoons and immediately think it's childish without
Exactly.
looking into without questioning why, without actually looking into the media, or without actually knowing these people and knowing why it's so important to them.
Yeah. It's like if you have like one or two people who are super into something, and it might seem like a one-off kind of deal, but we have an entire subculture of people like this, so there's got to be something behind that. There's got to be something, and it's been continuing on for honestly closing in on about half a century, not only in Japan but like around the world, and it's been gaining more traction as time goes on. So there's got to be something behind that. There's got to be some sort of validity back there. And there's a lot of people who are very successful. There's like an entire trope of characters who are in like very successful, or they're like decent salary men, things like that. Um, Even Gate, you have a lieutenant who is a huge otaku, and that's the main character. And his whole thing is like, I give it my all because I want to engage in my hobbies. And it's like that doesn't mean that somebody's not successful or anything. It's just that's where they lay. That's where they get their drive to do things. And that doesn't mean that we don't have relationships with other people, or anything like that. It's not a replacement for our social obligations, or or reaping the rewards of social interaction, because like you have three men here who are partnered. One of us is married, another one is essentially married. I've been with the same girl for closing in on 12 years now, and I met her at an anime convention. We wouldn't have that relationship, and we wouldn't engage with each other on the level that we do if we didn't have that commonality. Even if we don't watch the same things most of the time, we still have that commonality. We still understand each other on that level, because we're both so into things, into certain things, that like we understand why, even if we don't understand the specifics. And it's something that this media has, and this community has enriched our lives very much. And if anybody thinks that it's something that's holding us back, they have another thing coming, because we're getting a lot out of this, you know?
Exactly.
Completely the opposite. Yeah, it's really helped us inspire and move forward.
Exactly.
So,
And
honestly,
when I'm feeling horribly upset or depressed or something like that, I'll put in something like Gurren Lagann, or go back to some old stuff, and I feel that empowerment from this stuff. It's
yeah. I
we
mean,
we just seek that enrichment is all.
yeah, I have to say, like my work has kept me very much away from it for a while. It only when I get back into it, sitting there and taking a few moments to watch anime,
Yeah.
background noise. But it will help gain that inspiration and also help with my work in general too. It gets you back into the flow of doing things better and or different angles.
Yeah.
You know, it it's if anything, like I said, it helps you with move forward in life, not the other way around. It's not something to knock you down. If you're someone that is fitting that pure stereotype that a lot of people are anime fans for, it is nothing to do with anime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it has nothing to do with anime. It's something else that you're just not getting, because there's so many people who get into anime that go on to be much like better people a lot of the times because of what they're watching. Or there's a lot of very successful people who are into anime. I hate to bring him up, but Elon Musk, like, maybe he'll be a controversial figure to some people, but there's no denying that he is into a lot of the same tropes and a lot of the same community stuff as just regular otaku. I would venture to call him an otaku, even if he's like playing it up for laughs sometimes. I think that he's pretty genuine about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do find it funny too when he brings up the meme times. It's whether it's being for laughs or not. It's still great to see that from someone as in.
It sort of legitimizes it and maybe puts that idea in people's minds, like, hey, maybe the preconceived notions I have aren't exactly true, kind of deal. And
Yeah,
with
it get.
go
I
ahead,
think it's
Anubis.
important. Yeah, I think it's important I think it's important that people like that are visible.
Yeah.
Like there are people like Elon Musk, like Danny Chu, who who are deeply into anime and deeply into, like, not just the kinds of anime that you might see from someone who's just getting into anime. Like they're very deeply into some niche stuff, but they also have a level of success in life that could to some people be seen as enviable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I my first exposure to anime was Star Blazers, and then Space Battleship Yamato on Betamax, because my uncles were watching that, and they were shocked to find out that Star Blazers was actually Space Battleship Yamato, and they were watching, or one of my uncles was watching the old Betamaxes of that. And then there was my grandfather who was watching Ghost in the Shell. So that was sort of a background noise to me, and I started getting into it through that. And then Toonami comes around and Full Metal Alchemist comes around, and I start really getting into it around middle school. And then I really took off when I started going to a convention, and I met my girlfriend that I have now, and that's when I just went super hardcore into it. Because before then, I was more into Japanese culture, but not really so much into anime, because I was buying into the whole stereotype thing. Even back in like freshman year of high school. But I moved past that, and I understand things more as like it's more of a complex issue than just like looking at the social stigmas behind it. But
I think a lot of people do get caught up in those stereotypes and those social stigmas, and that does hold them back from expressing themselves in like people who would otherwise be like us, like normal people who are just into anime on a deep level.
Yeah.
Get held back from that because they're afraid of looking like a cringe weeb.
Exactly, because that stereotype is still so pervasive, and nobody who is like normal or moderately successful in their life is coming out and saying it, or if they are, it's they're sort of the rule, not the exception, and nobody really sees the rule. They only see the exception.
Right.
So,
Like outside of teenagers or people who have some kind of genuine mental issue, there's like maybe 14 people who actually act like cringe weebs genuinely.
yeah, the Sugoi Desu I will glomp you ugu thing it's more of a meme than anything, and if it ever existed, it existed like God, it existed like 10 years ago, and it's not really a thing anymore.
It was 10 years ago, and it's all teenagers
Yeah.
who don't really know any better because they just got to the convention environment, and it's just that energy swirling around their head. They don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's was my first convention was Anime Boston 2009, and I just went ham, you know. There's some pictures of me. I'm wearing a hachimaki and I'm sweating out of every orifice. And I'm like, it was just my first exposure to all that stuff. Like, it wasn't my first exposure to anime per se. It was my first exposure to seeing like all of these products in the same place and all of these people who enjoy this stuff in the same place. It was just like mind blowing to me.
Yeah, my first one was Icon over here in 2001. It was 2000, no, it might have been 2002. 2001, 2002. And no joke, I remember cosplaying as Trunks, as looking where my hair was spray painted purple. I was almost kind of looking like my avatar. With a sword, with a European sword that I had with me, and I was able to brandish it on the I bought it there, and I was able to brandish it when I was at the time. Which was interesting. But
back in those days,
it was because obviously but it was and even then I was being very careful, but it was just but I also wore like I think I had like baggy like jean shorts and stuff on. I was like it was kind of funny. But that was my first, and yeah, and then most of the time was like late night, just sitting there going to the one of the buildings and just watching. They had like constantly running on all the different things like anime until like it was really that was my first exposure. But it was like in the dealer room and stuff, and just hanging out with friends. But the energy is there, like especially when you're a teenager. 2001, I was a senior, junior in high school.
Yeah. I keep on forgetting you're not like 27.
No,
you sound and look like you're 27.
I'm 37.
Yeah.
I was born in '83. I'll be 38 at the end of the year. So yeah, I could pass for like my voice and still and apparently from what people say from my recent pictures, I still look like I'm not 30 in my 30s yet. I don't have any grays yet too, so I'm hanging in there.
I've looked like a 22-year-old since I was 14, so I kind of understand.
I've been I've been around. So yeah, I've been around for a while. With that too. Like I'm someone I'm almost 40 and so stuff. You should see like I have up in my master bedroom. I got the anime figures that I kept that are all there and whatnot, and all of our DVDs and stuff are all there in the corner next to my PC. So it's and then even when you walk into the living room here, we have a big a giant bookcase here that I built, and my father-in-law helped secure up top to it, and all throughout it is manga. Is Japanese. Is the name of them as the Japanese wooden dolls, and also the geisha girl statues all over it too. But
when your cat's not knocking them.
Yeah. When the cat's not knocking. She was doing that a couple times recently. Actually, yesterday she knocked over my DVDs because our cat that we've gotten recently, she's her name. We call her Kagome. Her cat's name is Kagome, and she has figured out how to climb up there and go up to the top of the loft we have in the living room. It's got like a high ceiling in it, and it's really not something we can get to unless we have like a ladder. But she was able to somehow climb up the big thing and jump up there. and she of course jumps down. But that whole shelf there is all manga. Is practically all manga. I have like the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack too. So it's like in my own house, my own yard. I have a mortgage and all this, and I'm almost hitting 40, and I'm not embarrassed by it. And also, it's like, and it isn't. Yeah, I'm not going to the ugu weed, glock kind of stuff going on. I don't present myself like that, and I go too crazy. But at the same time, too, I can talk, especially if I get into an anime series recently, like some of the newer stuff that I've been trying to finally dive back into. I'll talk about it ad nauseum. There's nothing, I have no shame in it at all. It's stuff that I like, and it keeps me. It keeps me going throughout the day, especially when I deal with the crap I deal with at work sometimes.
Yep. I know that feeling.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
The escapism is there.
Yeah.
But it's also not just escapism, but it also helps with the inspiration.
Yes.
For new things.
Exactly.
This is all. I guess we got into very complex topics, so.
Yeah.
We've been on for about 2 hours now, so we want to close out. Any closing statements? That was a little bit formal sounding, but
I know it's all right. Anubis, I'm sorry. I was kind of I feel bad that you didn't get too.
No worries. No, it's very interesting.
Yeah, you're like Anubis. Actually runs his own podcast with 2 other people called NTR Radio.
Oh, nice.
And so he does this every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, yeah.
Every 2 weeks.
We've
been on the same like I've been on as a guest a few times, so like we've gone into we've talked a lot together, and he's also Anubis has also been on for I believe 1 or 2 previous AsobiFM episodes as well. So
yeah, I think it was 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll definitely check out your podcast. Yeah, but I guess for closing statements of mine, this is that as you can hear my daughter jumping around in the background. It's you can be an anime fan and be a full-fledged adult with a career and everything. It's not that the stereotype is absolutely false. It's if you are in that if someone is part of that very negative stereotype that is fits it 100%, and it's like this really creepy kind of basement all stuff, has nothing to do with that.
Yeah,
nothing to do with it. It's something with their lifestyle, their personality and everything. The anime is just the flavoring they put around that, and it's not really has nothing to do with it. Yeah, and anime has a lot of diverse. There's so many different people that have been into it.
Yeah,
politically, racially, gender, it doesn't matter. It's a very diverse group already. Has been for decades.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one is that people need to understand what anime fans are really like.
Because the only exposure they get to them is just seeing them online, and that hasn't been helped lately.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 is that people need to not let being an anime fan hold them back from whatever they want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to not let that false stigma become a real stigma.
Yeah.
And not let that perception hold them back from becoming the kind of otherwise normal person who's just into anime.
My life got infinitely better after I got rid of that feeling, that holding myself back.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Same.
Yeah. All right, that'll just about do it. You want to check out NTR Radio. I believe you're doing one tonight, Anubis?
Yes. Yeah, that'll be around 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yes. You can look. I believe you can find NTR Radio by searching it on YouTube. You can also go to @NTR Radio on Twitter.
NTR_radio.
Or NTR_ Radio on Twitter. You can find Chuck's Twitter handle on the screen now. It's at Prince Trunks, and TimeEnforcerAnubis is at TeAnubis. I am Shinden9. I am found on Twitter at Shinden9, and this is AsobiFM at AsobiFM on Twitter. Really want to get away from Twitter, I guess, but you know. And I also sell patches. I only have one design so far on Etsy, but you can find that at the link at AsobiFM. And yeah, that'll be it. I've been Shinden9. And if my guests want to play themselves out.
I'm TimeEnforcerAnubis.
Just want to say, hey, thanks for listening, guys, and hope to chat again soon.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, I don't mind stopping.
Yeah.
Always good. Could definitely talk more.
Yeah.
A lot of different topics.
Yeah. I look forward to talking with you more, and I wish you the best of luck, and hope everything's going well with you, your wife, and your kid. Thanks for showing up, man.
You got it. Take care, guys.
Take care.